But our next speaker is the 2015 Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. Mari Cooper has been the orchestra director and chairperson of the music department for the Fox Chapel School District in Allegheny County in western Pennsylvania for the past 14 years. Under Mari's leadership, the Fox Chapel Area School District became the first public school to be recognized as an exemplary program by the Middle States Accreditation Committee. She has received numerous awards for her teaching, including Pennsylvania/Delaware String Teachers Association Outstanding New Orchestra Teacher Award, and also she received the Yale University Distinguished Music Educator Award. Mari is passionate about her service to children, passionate about her service to the profession, and certainly passionate about arts education. I just had a chance to meet her for the first time yesterday evening when we had a chance to break bread a little bit. And if we could clone her and put her all over this state, we would be accomplishing the things that Scott was talking about in terms of teachers taking on responsibility for the profession and for arts education. She is exemplar. No wonder that she is Pennsylvania's Teacher of the Year. So please join me in welcoming Mari Cooper.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I have to tell you, I met Scott Schuler several years ago at Yale, and I have been speaking all over Pennsylvania this year and have not been as nervous as I am at this moment. I am going to remain tethered. This evening, my orchestra has a concert, so I'm going to be untethered on the podium tonight. So I will stay tethered here. I am incredibly grateful to the Education Policy and Leadership Committee for championing the arts in Pennsylvania. I grew up in the state of Indiana, and I really felt that I had upgraded when I landed in a commonwealth, a society where people ought to work together for the general good. There are very few organizations that embrace this idea in the way that EPLC does, and so I thank you. In my heart, there is no greater cause than offering every child in this nation a quality education. Quality education always includes the arts. On Sunday mornings, I find myself listening to the talking heads discuss the myriad of issues in public education, from teacher retention, pension plans, and school choice to standardized testing. As questions of equity arise, John Dewey's words ring in my ears. Quote, "Most of us live in a world in which everyone has a calling and occupation, something to do. Some are managers and others are subordinates. But the great thing for one as for the other is that each shall have had the education which enables him to see within his work all there is in it of large and human significance." Over the din of arguments about the Common Core, I think of Thomas Friedman's writings. Quote, "The jobs of the new middle will require you to be a good collaborator, leverager, adapter, explainer, synthesizer, model builder, localizer, or personalizer. And these approaches require you, among other things, to be able to learn how to learn, to bring curiosity and passion to your work, to play well with others, and to nurture your right-brained skills." I agree with Dewey and Friedman. Our job is to create an informed citizenry and to prepare our students for the ever-changing face of the future. I believe that we have an obligation to educate all of our children in a manner that is suitable for many different trajectories. The world is changing quickly, and our education system must adapt as readily to this fluid environment. How do we prepare our children for careers that have not yet been created? How do we prepare them to work in multiple settings and travel between different cultures? How do we change our current educational structure to meet the needs of a future that has yet to emerge? The answers to these questions are complex, And while we do not have a complete picture of the job market in 20 years, we do know many of the skills that will be needed. In a global economy, our students will work in environments that require complex solutions to difficult issues. They will need to be able to identify a problem, analyze it, and create a solution. We need to teach them critical thinking and problem solving, as we do every day in the arts. In music classes, we ask them to identify issues of pitch, rhythm, and tone production, alter their technique accordingly, and try once again to interpret the composer's intent. In the visual arts, we have them look at their own compositions, analyze their use of line, shape, color, and pattern, and then revise their work. And when their correction doesn't succeed, or their performance is less than stellar, we pick them up, dust them off, and ask them to try again. For we know that true problem solving is a high art and requires discipline and resilience. In a global economy, our students will change careers, not simply jobs, multiple times in their lives. As they move between these careers, they not only need to be able to process new information, but also entirely new systems. We must teach them to think in terms of processes, not simply basic constructs. We must teach them to transfer knowledge from one activity to another, as we do every day in the arts. Students in theater recite a monologue from Shakespeare and then move to a monologue from O'Neill, with the understanding that inflection is reflective of the human condition, not simply a plot development. Dancers, as beautiful as the ones that we saw this morning, learn new sequences of steps that have been repeated thousands of times in different contexts. And when the sequences begin to look mundane and tired, we look to our students for new ideas, for we know that the creative process is high art and requires flexibility. In global economy, our students will need to be good team members and clear communicators. We must teach them to express themselves and also to listen to others, as we do every day in the arts. In ensemble works throughout the fine arts, our students constantly balance their own performance, volume, spacing, timing, with those of others. Throughout the fine arts, our individual students shape constructive criticism, accept critiques, and then begin to create anew. Our students quickly learn that the road to success is built upon the advice and support of others. And when communication is difficult, we help them temper it. We teach our students to respect differences and to embrace new experiences, for we know that human expression is a high art and requires openness. I grew up in a small rural college town in the state of Indiana, not the city in Pennsylvania. My peers were daughters of farmers, sons of factory workers, and some faculty brats like myself. I began playing the violin when I was 3. The college in our town had a strong school of music, but my public school had no strings program. I relied heavily upon summer camp experiences. At school, I sang in choir, but as a violinist, I had no voice. I currently teach at Fox Chapel Area High School in a suburban district directly across the Allegheny from Pittsburgh. Fox Chapel is comprised of 6 boroughs. One of them, Fox Chapel proper, is one of the 1,000 wealthiest neighborhoods in the United States. But 2 of our other boroughs have some of the lowest per capita income in Allegheny County. In many ways, my school district is a microcosm of equity in education. The tax dollars from our wealthier household and an industrial park allow for opportunities for our less fortunate students. As a girl who attended that high school in rural Indiana, Fox Chapel area seems to offer endless opportunities to its students. We boast of over 20 advanced placement classes, in addition to classes in everything from robotics to astronomy. We even have our own planetarium. Our art students enjoy entire classes, not just sections of a class, in ceramics, jewelry, photography, AP art, and painting and drawing. Through school sponsorship, my orchestra has been able to perform in places as grand as Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal and Heinz Hall in downtown Pittsburgh. All of these opportunities are available to every single student, regardless of their economic situation. My students have a voice. I don't tell you this to brag about my school. Rather, I tell you this because I believe this is the education that should be available to every child in the Commonwealth. In fact, I believe that this is the education that should be available to every child in the United States. I believe that as teachers, we must be the voice for those students who do not have a voice. We must advocate for their right to a quality education. And in particular, we must advocate for their ability to experience education in the arts. When I began teaching at Fox Chapel area, I had no real understanding of what my voice would be. My framework for advocacy in the arts was heavily influenced by conversations with more experienced teachers, such as my dear friend, Arita Caligeris. Arita had one of the largest bags of tricks in the business. She had a fix for just about everything. But behind her tricks were deep-seated beliefs and values. This is why her advocacy for the arts was practically foolproof, and her voice was so strong. So here are the things that I learned from Arita. Number one, relationships, relationships, relationships. Everybody remembers the first time they met Arita, whether it was at a PMEA festival or at a football game. More importantly, we all felt that we had a connection to her that went beyond those initial meetings. With her students, her colleagues, and even her administration, she built lasting relationships. Many of us would go to great lengths to ensure that we someday might get the secret famous baklava recipe. These relationships were paramount to her success as a teacher and to the support that she built for the music program in the North Hills. These relationships are the building blocks for advocacy in all of our programs. Number two, be a good member of your community. I doubt that Arita ever missed a major community event in the North Hills. Music teachers are always being asked to have groups perform in the most unlikely places, and we frequently wonder if they are worth the time and effort to organize the kids, the music, the transportation, and the equipment. The resounding answer is yes. Many taxpayers in our school districts do not have kids in the school system. Our arts programs need to be as relevant to them as they are to the parents of children in our schools. In Fox Chapel, our art department produces our school calendar that goes out to everybody in the community, with each month showcasing artworks from the schools. We all have become to rely upon this. It actually is the one place that I use other than my cell phone to keep dates. Our art department also sponsors a monthly art show at the local hospital. For us, we consider these events to be an artistic thank you to the community. Number three, constantly educate those around you. I was always learning from Arita. In many ways, I felt as if I were her student when I was around her. I would watch her interact with her students, my students, colleagues, and friends. I was always listening, and she was always educating. I think that as arts teachers, we forget that others might not value what we do simply because they don't understand it. It is critical that we be able to articulate the importance of arts education, and I believe the broader importance of teaching creativity and problem solving to those who might not always understand what we do. Conversations in the grocery store can be more powerful than you imagine. Number 4, the best advocates are our students and their families. Rita was larger than life, but when she was with her students, they took center stage. She highlighted them, cheering on their successes and taking great pride in their growth. Her presence was simply part of the whole of the North Hills music experience. Her students and their families could express exactly why music was important and everything that they learned from her. She taught music, but more importantly, she taught human beings. When students and families express the value of arts education, then the entire community listens. It is imperative that we help our students articulate that value and the value that they place on the arts and offer them opportunities to speak publicly. Number 5, last but not least, stay 5 steps ahead of the game. And I see Abby back there, and I know she knows this, but Arita always knew ahead of a PMEA festival where the best shopping was. Her forms were always the first ones to arrive in the host's mailbox. It wasn't because she was on top of the game. It was because she was ahead of the game. The strongest programs project problems long before those problems ever surface. We all have to think 5 steps ahead of our current situation. I frequently say that I teach in Oz. I cross the Highland Park Bridge and I follow the yellow brick road to my job. A few years ago, one of my principals came up to me and asked that I helped her apply for the Middle States Association exemplary program. At the time, I thought that she was crazy. It was going to mean that I was going to have to pull together stakeholders in our community, analyze the data from them, write a 75-page report, and create plans for the future. I was really not looking forward to it, but I also really valued that principal's advice. So I did it. It almost killed me, but I did it. Receiving that distinction allowed us, several years later, to be able to argue for a renovation of our high school auditorium, and more importantly, to get 2 classes added to our courses, world music and the history of rock and roll, in order to be able to attract more students to our area at a time when they were not approving any new courses. At the time that she had approached me to ask me to write for this, I was thinking, why? We're healthy, what do I need to do? But she knew enough to know that we needed to be 5 steps ahead. I think that we have to be prepared for the worst so that we can produce the best. The best artists, the best students, the best people. For me, advocacy, whether it is for arts education or for public education, is not an event. It is a philosophy. I believe strongly that the future of our nation can only be built in accordance with a strong education system for all of our children, regardless of economic background, race, gender, religious preferences, or sexual orientation. If we are to compete in a global economy, then we must ensure that students from the poorest households have the same opportunities as their wealthier counterparts. We must fund schools equitably. We do not know where the next Einstein will be born. But we do know that we will need that mind to propel our nation into the future. Offering quality education to all of our children is not a nicety. It is a necessity. I believe fundamentally that teaching creativity is a critical component in our development as a nation. The spirit of American invention, good old Yankee ingenuity, is rooted in the stories of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. It is this legacy, this ability to create new solutions and ideas that places us uniquely within a global economy. Our creativity separates us from our competition in China and India. So we must teach creativity in all of our classrooms, and we must allow for our teachers to be creative in their teaching. We do not know where the next Steve Jobs will be born. But we do know that we need that inventive mind to send our nation to prominence in a global economy. Teaching creativity and teaching creatively is not a nicety. It is a necessity. We know, and particularly in this crowd, that study in the arts increases brain activities, impacts academic success, and improves cognition. We know that. We know that the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves that connects our two hemispheres of the brain, is larger in students that have studied the arts, and that they therefore literally use more of their brain. We know that students who take 4 years of art classes perform 100 points better on the SATs than their counterparts, and we know that art students are more cooperative, self-confident, and participate more in community service. What we do not know is where the next Yo-Yo Ma will be born. But we do know that we need that humanity for the future well-being of our citizenry. Arts education for every student is not a nicety. It is a necessity. In my heart, there is no greater cause than offering every child in this nation a quality education. And a quality education always includes the arts. Thank you. Actually, it's funny because, hi, thanks. It's interesting that you would bring that up. I live in the city. So my tendency is to actually go the other way because I'm very concerned about what's happening in the Pittsburgh public schools. And as a taxpayer in Pittsburgh, I am particularly concerned about, and I'm particularly concerned about that. So I haven't looked the other way down the river. I have looked over towards our schools. And actually, we just wrote to the Grammy Foundation to try to get some money to be able to take our students into the city schools. And we've been looking at some ways to try to do equity in that way. One of the reasons that the city schools worry me so much is that I really believe that arts education is an ecosystem. So I think that it's really easy, and you're, to your point exactly. So you are a woman of my heart. I think that arts, however our cities do, and I think this is actually for public education in general. I think that if you look at what's happening in York, and you think about what has been happening in the York school system, and you look at what's happening in the Erie school systems, you have to understand that that will eventually happen in all school systems. That we must work as a whole and as a collective, and our voice as teachers as a collective is much greater. So I really take your point to heart, and we have been looking at it the other way. I haven't considered going up 28. And so I really appreciate you asking me that question, because that opens my mind to new possibilities. And also possibilities, not simply for me, because there's always, time is always an issue, and particularly this year, but for all of our, we have lots of music programs that can do, in our school district that can go. So I really appreciate that. But I do think that we have to pay particular attention to what's happening collectively. Pittsburgh, coming from Indiana, I am blown away by living in Pittsburgh. I turn around and there are phenomenal music programs left and right. But I'm not sure that we can sustain those programs if we are not also helping the city to sustain the health and maintenance of that program.
Any other questions?
I should, oh, yes.
I'm just interested to hear what you have to say about connecting the K-12 system to after school, out of school time, and summer learning.
Well, I think of teaching, so let me take a step back. My parents are both college professors, or were college professors, they've retired, and my brother is a lawyer. And so when I came to teaching in the public school system, I didn't plan on teaching in the public school system. I taught at the college level, and I was working on my doctorate, and I finished 3 years of that, of all my coursework, and needed health insurance. And so I took this job at Fox Chapel, and 2 weeks later it was clear by some little inconvenient thing that I fell in love with teenagers that I was going to stay. So I came into teaching not thinking about teaching as a culture of a number of hours. So I really think about my teaching as being who I am. And I think of it really in terms of an entire profession. So I don't see, it's difficult for me because I don't think of my school day ending. And I think our students are, they are tethered to their cell phones. So this morning I was receiving texts all morning long, thus and such didn't do what they were supposed to do and what's going on. And they don't have those same boundaries. I think that teachers have to lead the charge for education. I think that we're at a point where nobody else is going to lead that charge. And I think that teachers have to lead, arts teachers have to lead the charge for arts education. And I don't think that we have the luxury anymore of thinking what happens at 4:30 or what needs to happen in the summer. To me, the question as a teacher that you have to ask yourself every morning when you get up is, am I prepared to go and do what is right for the student and what is best for the students? And we are constantly failing them, and it's very difficult. I had a pre-service teacher ask me, when's the last time that you thought about quitting? And I was like, ooh, last week when I failed a student, and I didn't fail them in a grade, but where I felt that I had not lived up to what they needed. So I don't really make those distinctions in my own mind, and I think that as a profession we need not to. I think we need to be offering, we need to think very fully, but I don't think that that's an arts issue. I think that's an education issue. That's a broader, in my mind, that's a broader educational issue.
Final question? One more?
Scott has one. Uh-oh.
As the teacher of the year, you have a special opportunity. You have a full-time teaching job.
Yes.
But is there any way that others who lead organizations or have events can leverage your status as teacher of the year to have a bigger impact?
Well, I really think that each of us has as much of an impact as we want to have and try to have. I believe, I'm a firm believer that I can't change the world. I can only change my corner of the world. And my corner of the world is about a bunch of kids who are going to go, and I pray they change the world. And so I think that we can leverage our voices in many different ways. And I also think that people need to be comfortable in whatever role they're in. The one exciting initiative that I like, which I was telling you a little bit about earlier, is that as the Teacher of the Year, because so what I decided as Teacher of the Year was that I didn't know what I was doing. So I shouldn't say that, I'm on TV. But that coming from Fox Chapel and that experience is one very specific experience. And the Commonwealth is a very, very large state. With a lot of people working in a lot of different settings and under a lot of different constraints. And so I spent the first 5 months of Teacher of the Year going into schools and trying to find out what was happening. So every time I had a day off, I was trying to get into a school, or every time there was a PMEA event, I was going into the schools and trying to find out about what was happening. And I would say that I've seen some remarkable teaching. And some remarkable, just incredible things that are happening. But I also have seen that teachers are beginning to have their own voice and are beginning to get out of the culture of being afraid to say things. So I became very aware that one of the things that teachers said to me, I loved this because teachers all said the same things. So I didn't once hear about standardized testing. I mean, I would hear that as a secondary thing, but what people said was, I don't feel that I can do creatively in my classroom what I came here to do. That there are so many initiatives, and I'm trying to solve these initiatives, that I'm having problems going into that well of why I became a teacher and pulling that. And the other thing that I heard resoundingly was about equity and being able to help all children. And so along those ways, one of the things I've wanted to do is to try to connect the classroom voices, the voices that I think of as the classroom voices, the voices of my students and teachers, with policymakers. And so we are in the middle, the National State Teacher of the Year organization in Pennsylvania is in the middle of creating an advisory committee that will be used in trying to represent teachers from all over the Commonwealth and to connect them with policymakers. So that's the one thing I can change. But I believe that everybody in this room, clearly because you're here, but all of you also have friends who you can impact and talk to. And everybody goes in, people don't go into teaching because they get summers off. I mean, you don't do that, and you don't go into teaching because you think you're going to be done at 2:30, because you're still going to go home and grade, or you're still going to have a rehearsal, or that kid is going to be lingering in your mind. That is not why teachers teach. Teachers teach because they love children, and teachers teach because they love their content area, and teachers teach because they love connecting those two, and because it reminds them of when passion got sparked in their lives when they were little. And if you can go and talk to teachers and get them to remember that, if everybody in this room took 3 teachers and got them to remember that moment in their life, then education in Pennsylvania would change. So,
I'll take this. Okay, all right.